How do you feel about publicly sharing your faith? I don't know about you, but the idea used to terrify me. Now, I didn't grow up in a house where we attended church or prayed or read the Bible or talked about God at all. And on top of that, I was very shy. So when I met my husband and he just boldly talked about Jesus to everyone that he met, it shocked me. I was slightly jealous of that amazing ability that he had, but I was also slightly terrified. So one day I said to him, I think I'm going to pray and ask for boldness. And it worked for Peter in the Bible, right? He went from denying Jesus to less than 2 months later proclaiming his salvation to thousands of people. And my husband said, Katie, I would pray about that. I know he knows I don't like to be afraid of things. He said, but be careful what you pray for because God answers your prayers, just not always in the way that you would expect. So I thought, no, it's fine. So I prayed about it. And about a week later, I was asked by my church to run this marketing campaign for this event that they were having. No problem. Behind the scenes, I could handle that. So I show up at church the following week. It's a church of about 300 to 400 people. And they said, oh, good, you're here. I'm going to have you come up on stage right after announcements to explain to everybody what we're doing. I really wished that I could have just run out of the church. Like the idea of standing in front of people, even though all I was talking about was marketing, which was something I was passionate about, it was horrible. But I couldn't get out of it, so I went up there. I don't know if you've ever spoken publicly before and if you're someone that is afraid. So I literally was shaking. Like I was certain the entire congregation could see my body shaking uncontrollably, sweating. I felt like I was going to throw up. I got through it. It was like a 3-minute message or little spiel. I get off the stage. I bet 15 people came up to me and said, wow, clearly you public speak for a living. That was amazing. You're so comfortable on stage. And I thought, how could they not see me shaking? But clearly God was showing me that he had a plan and a purpose for my life and that it wasn't up to me and how good I was, that he was going to give me the boldness and the abilities that I needed to fulfill what he had in store for me. So I thought, okay, this is it. I've asked for boldness. I'm going to have to start talking to people about Jesus. But how do I do that? Because some people just jump up and they're evangelizing on the street, and I knew that that wasn't the next step for me. I couldn't just go from not talking about it at all to just boldly professing it everywhere. So I decided baby steps were a better route. Now, I had people tell me that these ideas that I used were silly, that they weren't going to have an impact, but let me tell you, they literally changed my life because I started with these little steps, these little tidbits, and then I grew and grew and grew, and here I am today. So I wanted to share these with you because you just might be somebody like me who was afraid to talk to people, and you thought, how can I begin this conversation? Because sometimes it's that first step of starting a conversation that's so difficult. Once you're talking, you're okay. So the first thing that I did was I started carrying a Bible with me everywhere I went. I would carry it with me, sometimes in my purse, sometimes in my arms. I would sit at a restaurant and sit it on the table. On an airplane, it would be in my lap. Anywhere that I went, I had this Bible. And what that did was show the people around me, oh, she's a believer. And it opened the door for people to start a conversation with me. It was a really great tool. Other things that you can do that are small baby steps is I started wearing Christian t-shirts. I bet my closet still has 100 Christian t-shirts in it. Anything that gets that out there. But remember, when you're wearing a Christian t-shirt or Christian jewelry, you have to act like a Christian and be loving and kind and patient with people. Otherwise, it really gives them a wrong impression. I started adding a tagline to the bottom of my emails that was a Bible verse. I started sharing things on social media, just Bible verses, tidbits. And my entire ministry started because I was sharing tidbits of interesting things that I found in the Bible. And then that opened the door and people would start asking me questions and they would send me messages and where did you find this? And that was a great way of spreading the gospel without having to walk up to a stranger and start a conversation. Listening to Christian music, praying in a restaurant. My family, we always pray before every meal, and we live in the South now, and that's normal, that's typical to see a family praying together, but when we lived in the North, it wasn't normal, and we would get a lot of people staring at us. But we would ask our server, hey, is there anything we can add to our prayers for you today? And then we'd always leave her a nice tip when we left, because those are just ways that you can share the gospel if you're a little bit nervous. But there are a couple of things that really pushed me more than anything else. Number one is I grew more confident in who the Lord was by spending time with him and time in his word. Because my biggest fear was I can't talk to people because what if they ask a question and I don't have an answer? First of all, that should not stop you from talking to people, because you can always say, I don't know the answer to that. I know what the Lord has done for me. Let's look up that answer together. Let's figure that out. That's a great way to start discipling someone. But as I grew and as I studied and I learned and I spent more time with the Lord and more time in his word, my confidence grew and it gave me that ability to speak to people. The other thing is when I recognized eternity and how long eternity was and what the consequences were for someone who didn't know Jesus. When you begin to study that and realize how real eternity is, how real hell is, how real separation from God for eternity is, that alone gave me a passion, because I don't want to stand before God one day and say I missed it because I was afraid. I didn't talk to that person because of my fear, when God would give me an opportunity to speak to someone. So that is literally my driving force behind everything that I do, is I just want to reach people however that is. Sometimes that's standing on the street talking to strangers. Sometimes it's going door to door. Sometimes it's sitting in a mall waiting for people to walk by. Sometimes it's sharing things on your social media. Sometimes it's talking to your friend or your family member. There are so many different ways that you can begin making those steps. So I just encourage you, whatever that is, whatever the Lord has put on your heart, step out of your comfort zone, take that step, pray and ask him to give you the boldness, but be careful, because he will. Now go let your light shine.